It's all right. So it's a bigger question for society. If we're looking towards having about 10% of plastics worldwide being produced by corn and by sugar in the very near future, and at that point we begin to hit the same problems we had when we turned that same corn and that same sugar into fuels for cars. That if we consider it unethical to turn food into fuels for cars, then probably we should be concerned about turning food into plastic cups and shampoo bottles and bags and stuff. And then, of course, there's biofuels. And the idea that the biofuels problem has gone away is just simply not true. It's true that investment in ethanol has dropped to nothing. And it's true that there's a move away from trying to support new biodiesel from palm oil and so forth. But what we're actually seeing is probably the largest rush to invest in biofuels that's happened yet. And where that money is going is into trying to make biofuels from biomass, not necessarily from food biomass, but from corn stalks or from wood chips or from algae, as well as from these new biomass sources like jatropha, which we're going to hear more about, and also sugarcane. And we're seeing a massive increase in sugarcane plantations, not just in Brazil, but also in sub-Saharan Africa. And what we're seeing, particularly, is deals being made between the very largest oil companies and companies who are developing a new technology called synthetic biology. So we have these deals being made between Shell and a synthetic biology called Genomatica. We're having these deals with BP and Exxon and a synthetic biology called synthetic genomics, Total Oil, Chevron, all across the landscape of the oil industry. These companies are investing in this new technology. And I just want to mention what this technology is. So synthetic biology is basically genetic engineering on steroids. It's extreme genetic engineering. And what synthetic biology involves is printing out new bits of DNA from a computer, the same way you would print out on a laser printer, and then using those to program microbes in ways you could never imagine before. So when Eric said we're not talking about extraterrestrials, well, we kind of are here. These life forms have never existed on Earth before, and they couldn't have evolved on Earth either. So you're creating yeast and bacteria and other microbes which will gobble up biomass, whether it's sugar or other forms of biomass, and then spit out plastics, or spit out gasoline, or spit out jet fuel. And these are contained in large fermenters. So you have companies like DuPont who have these synthetic microbes which gobble up corn and spit out bioplastics. And what this now means is it's possible to take this differentiated stuff, this living stuff, biomass, and turn it into any number of different things in a way that wasn't possible before. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this switch. So that's part of the story. So I want to tell you 3 things about biomass before I finish tonight. Whether it's wood chips, and we're seeing a massive trade in wood chips that never existed before, and sawdust. Whether it's the straw that comes off of fields, or whether it's algae. It's simply not true to call biomass carbon neutral, to say that it's a renewable energy option. We're about to go into the negotiations at Cancun, and we'll be told a lot about that, but it's simply not true. Some of the calculations by, for example, Grain, who I mentioned earlier, suggest that it may be that as much as 60% of global greenhouse emissions come from agriculture. If that's true, pulling our transport fuels and our plastics from agriculture is just adding to those emissions. The theory, of course, is, and that's because we have, for example, the use of fertilizers in production, and fertilizer is very intensive. Fertilizers produce, when you put them on the field, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times stronger as a greenhouse gas. And in fact, biomass is a terrible source of energy anyway, so you have to use rather a lot of it. In fact, at the smokestack, when you burn, say, wet wood chips, you actually produce more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than you get from coal. So immediately, it's a bigger polluter than some of the fossil fuels you're supposed to be replacing. But the idea is we're going to fix that carbon dioxide in subsequent plants. That's a theoretical idea. And even if it's true, the timescales are often totally off base. If you burn a tree, for example, for electricity, and that tree has taken 80 years to grow, you release all that CO2 in about a minute, and it takes you 80 years to fix it back into a tree again. That 80 years, that's carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, is causing dangerous climate change. It's not a solution. Secondly, the important thing about biomass is it's all in the global south. Although it appears that biomass is plentiful and all around us, in fact, 86% of all biomass exists in the tropics and subtropics. What that means is an industry that wants to run on biomass and wants to run our entire civilization on biomass is going to go to the south, and it's going to take land in the south, and that's exactly what it's doing. The synthetic biology companies and the biomass companies are buying up land and making deals in Brazil right now and in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're going to move on to Indonesia and Malaysia and southern India. We've already seen in sub-Saharan Africa something like 22% of all the land grabs are for biofuels. There's an area the size of Denmark has been grabbed in sub-Saharan Africa just for biofuels. And that's going to increase. The biomasters, the biomass companies, want to go to Africa, and they're already making deals in Brazil. So this is going to hit Africa and Brazil and South America strongest first, and then it's going to move on to the rest of the tropics. And that means pushing off of the land the people who live there right now. And that means hunger. The last thing I wanted to point out about biomass that's important, we simply don't have enough of it. It looks like it's everywhere. It looks like it's plentiful. If you look at the world from space, there's all that green, 230 billion tons of it every year. But we use a quarter of that already. We use it for food, we use it to clothe ourselves, we use it for textiles. And it's not as if it's just going spare in the same way as, say, oil and coal are going spare when they're sitting underground, not being used. This is an active part of our biosphere. We require it to clean the water, to clean our air, to cycle nutrients, and even beyond that, it has all sorts of spiritual and cultural values. And it has values, intrinsic values for nature that we don't even understand yet. There's an outfit in San Francisco called the Global Footprint Network. Every year they look at how much of global biomass we could take and how much we have taken. And since about the 1980s, they figured that we've been taking more biomass than the Earth could give away sustainably. In fact, this year, 2010, we took 150% of the biomass that the Earth could give away sustainably. Every year they set a date, they call it Earth Overshoot Day. And that's the date in which we've overshot the amount of biomass we can take. Last year, it was the 25th of September. This year, it was the 21st of August. That's 1 month forward in the space of a year. That's to say, we can't even use the biomass we've already got. We have to cut back. And then we think we can start turning it into plastics and chemicals and fuels and so forth. It's ludicrous. It does not work. The biomasters have an answer for this. They think they're going to genetically modify crops in order to produce more biomass. They have what they call climate-ready crops, crops that will grow on marginal lands, crops that will grow in so-called marginal lands, salty lands, and will grow in unusual conditions. These aren't climate ready, they're biomass ready. And when you actually look at the patents, we found 262 patent families by BASF and Monsanto and others. When you look at these patents, they're not just claiming the genes in these, they're claiming the actual biomass that is grown. So what we're seeing is a grab, not just on the biomass, not just on the land underneath the biomass, but actually a legal claim on any bit of green stuff that's grown by the likes of Monsanto and Syngenta and BASF. That's the context for the Earth grab, and it really is a major grab. I'll hand over. Thank you.